Happy International Podcast Day. I just learned about International Podcast Day a few days ago, and it's interesting that it falls right around the anniversary of the beginning of my podcast. But happy International Podcast Day to those of you who celebrate, to all you podcasters and podcast listeners. And today we're not talking about podcasting. Today I'm going to talk about PMDD. So buckle up. I am your host, Naomi. Welcome back to the podcast. This is Mosaic in Progress. So what is PMDD? I talk about PTSD and CPTSD, and what alphabet are we adding into this? PMDD is premenstrual dysphoric disorder. It's basically a severe form of PMS. It is categorized as a severe, sometimes disabling extension of premenstrual syndrome. Premenstrual dysphoric disorder, or PMDD, is a severe form of premenstrual syndrome that includes physical and behavioral symptoms that usually resolve with the onset of menstruation. I was diagnosed with PMDD in my late teens, and I don't want to say it was never treated and it was completely ignored, because that's not entirely true. I was just never given any treatment options that actually worked for me. The solution was to put me on birth control pills, specifically Yaz. And if you know anything about recent lawsuits, you know why I mentioned that name specifically. It didn't work for me, really. It made me depressed. It made me gain weight. I was offered antidepressants, which made me first manic and then depressed, and also made me gain weight. And nothing that they ever gave me really worked for me, and it was just kind of brushed aside, and I was sort of sent off to therapists, like, oh, let them deal with your mood swings and your behavioral symptoms. But it's extreme, and I don't think it's talked about enough. Whenever PMS is mentioned, it's like, women are crazy. They get all hormonal and emotional right before they bleed, and we just can't deal with it. PMDD is so much more than PMS. I'm not even going to get into all of the misogyny around treating PMS like that, but PMDD is much more extreme than that. And when I say much more extreme, I mean around the time that my fertile window closes. So when I'm in my luteal phase, and it's literally like clockwork, like the day it happens, I can feel it. Suddenly, it feels like my world is crashing around me. And I'm saying this while in my luteal phase, and I'm having a very weird cognitive dissonance happening right now, because it feels like my world is crashing around me, and it feels very real. And I'm like, how are you talking about this when you know it's real? Because I know when I start bleeding and when I get towards the end of that, suddenly I'm going to realize that I was crazy. And I say that with a lot of love and not dismissively, but the entire time building up to my menstruation, I am suicidal. I feel like my relationship is falling apart. I feel like my career is falling apart. I feel like I am a failure at life. I feel like no one really loves me. I feel like a burden on everyone, and it is so far beyond any of the symptoms of depression that I have had throughout my life in struggling with depression. It's extremely intense, and I've never had a medical professional take it seriously. I've never had anyone address it in any way that was real or helpful. It was ignored for so long that I honestly forgot I had it. I was just like, why am I such a crazy person? Then I was like, oh yeah, I have this thing. And it's very difficult to gain support for it. I mentioned that I've never had a medical professional take it seriously. No one in your personal life takes it seriously. They don't realize the amount of support that's needed, the amount of reassurance, the amount of encouragement, and just extra love. No one gets how dark it gets inside of your head. And PMDD is associated with mood disorders, with anxiety and depression, with a history of trauma or abuse. Um, and it's, this is kind of like a repetitive thing when you start looking at somatic disorders and psychosomatic disorders and symptoms, that it just kind of all relates back. You're always saying, oh, it's related with a history of trauma. Oh, it's related with a history of abuse. And there was a book written years ago called The Body Keeps the Score that delves into this and how much trauma and abuse affects the body. And I was mentioning to my husband the other day, like my first menstruation. I remember it so specifically because it was 9901. And as I said to him that day, if you've been alive for any length of time, you've probably already put two and two together. My first menstruation was started 2 days before 9/11. And nobody made a big deal out of it. I started bleeding, and my older sister was already going through that, had been for several years, so it was just like, oh, just use her pads. There was no like, here's your first period kit, or oh, you're a woman now, or okay, well, you can expect these things to happen, or let's celebrate you, or here's a cup of hot tea, or anything. It was just like, well, that's happening now. And I think about that sometimes, about how dismissed it was, and how in so many families, even those who are not, pagan, spiritual, and ritualistic about bleeds, that it's marked as a coming of age, and it's something that's treated with reverence and love. And I got nothing. And 2 days later, I slept in. I never slept in. I never sleep in now. It's not a thing that I've ever really been able to do much. And I slept until 8:30, which was pretty late for me. I was usually up before the sun. And I got up. I was like dragging because I was cramping so bad. It was the first time I'd ever cramped, and I didn't understand what to do with it. And I was miserable, and drag myself out of bed, stumble into the living room, and the TV was on. The TV was never on during the day in our house. And I walk into the living room. Why is the TV on? And my mom's sitting there, my sisters are sitting there, and I walk in just as the second plane hit the second tower. I saw it live. That was the first thing that I saw that morning, the first thing that I was greeted with. And I don't mean to make that tragedy about me at all, but this was the beginning of my menstruation. In addition to all of the other trauma that I had already endured, my initial menarche started in a lack of love and was added to with trauma. Because viewing that is a trauma, and I'm not saying that it's the same trauma as someone who experienced it or someone who had family there, but it is a trauma to witness horrific events. We know this. They've studied this. And especially in children, which I was 13, I was a child, it has an even more significant effect. And I think it explains a lot about why I did have so many issues with my cycle so early on. It wasn't just, oh, it's irregular. Like, almost immediately, I was having horrific bleeds that would last for weeks and debilitating cramps and just all kinds of awful symptoms. I was diagnosed with ovarian cysts when I was 15. I would have these gigantic cysts pop up, whatever, and I could feel them in my abdomen. I never had to have surgery for them like a lot of people do because they would always rupture. And they still do. I still have that issue. It feels like a bomb going off inside of me. And there's nothing they can really do about it. They always say, oh, we can put you on birth control pills. And I'm always like, no, thank you. That makes me feel miserable. I'd rather deal with the pain than take something that makes me feel like I'm not me anymore. So why is this important to talk about, other than me having an audience that I can complain to without being interrupted? Women's health issues are so often ignored. They're underdiagnosed, undertreated, underfunded for research, under-researched. And as little research and funding and diagnosis and treatment goes into endometriosis and PCOS, they are two of the more common women's health issues to be diagnosed. And you hear a lot more about them than you ever do about PMDD, because those two cause physical symptoms that can interfere with working. And PMDD is just women being dysphoric and sad again. And that's not to ignore the physical symptoms of PMDD. Anything that you think of or associate with PMS, such as bloating, nausea, diarrhea, fatigue, all of these things are associated with PMDD. And some women who have PMDD even get cramps before they're bleeding that are similar or in line with the cramps that they have during menstruation. For a thankfully short period of time, I did. I would have cramps leading up to my period that were just as bad as the cramps that I had on my period. And it's ridiculous that this goes so ignored, undiagnosed or underdiagnosed and untreated, and so little research into it. And the only options that most women are given are birth control or antidepressants or both, or the old standby, lose weight. That one wasn't presented to me because at the time that I was diagnosed, I was technically considered a healthy weight, but that was because my scoliosis was so bad that I was 3 inches shorter than what my natural height is. And so even though I was about 30 pounds underweight, they considered me to be at a healthy weight. And I guess honestly, really, this is a cry for help. Not so much for me personally, though, honestly. It's not great right now. But I have hope that this podcast will reach the ears of someone who can actually do something, because women deserve better. They deserve better treatment options. They deserve better treatment of them as people and in dealing with this. And it's difficult to say that it would be different if it were men, because men's mental health is ignored just as much as women's is, honestly, if not more so, because men are encouraged to push down their feelings and not talk about them. Don't go to therapy, that makes you weak. And most of the men I know in my life would benefit significantly from therapy. I think everyone would benefit from therapy, but I think men need it more than women do because men don't have the outlets that women do. They're not encouraged to talk to each other about their feelings and their problems. I think all men should be in therapy. I think the world would be a better place if more men went to therapy. Even the good ones. That's a tangent. But the fact that so many women suffer from PMDD, and so the latest numbers indicate that it's between 1 in 12 or 1 in 20 women of childbearing age suffer from PMDD. That's significant. That's 5% conservatively. Closer to 10% if we take the more liberal number. And for us to not have anything to give women but here, take a birth control pill and some antidepressants that will make you gain weight and make you numb and make you feel like you're not yourself anymore, that will kill your libido and actually stop your cycle completely. And side note, this is a little known fact. Birth control pills do not regulate your cycle. They do not regulate your hormones. They stop your cycle. And when you bleed during the week that you're in your placebo pill week or not taking pills, it is what is called a withdrawal bleed. You are withdrawing from the hormones that you have been taken. It is not a true menstruation. And so they literally stop your cycle and you're not bleeding on a regular cycle anymore. You are artificially, chemically giving yourself hormones to mimic a normal cycle, which is why so many people feel like they're not themselves while they're on birth control pills, because you do not have a natural regulatory cycle within your body anymore. You're taking pills to mimic one, and it does not have the same effect on the rest of your hormones that control things like your mood and your metabolism and your libido, because it's a fake menstrual cycle. Side note over. So, barring major research coming out and treatment options being offered, what can we do? So, for those of you who are supportive partners or friends or whatever, this is my suggestion to you, and you can be as involved or not involved as you want to be, but this is what would be helpful. Put on your wall calendar, your phone, something that helps you keep track of your friend with PMDD's cycle, or your partner, or whoever it is that you know who has PMDD. Keep track of it. When you see that they have entered their luteal phase, their infertile phase, which is a few days after ovulation, check in with them. And don't make it weird and like, hey, I know you're not fertile anymore. How are you feeling? Or you can do that if that's the dynamic you have with your friend. But just say, hey, I know things are kind of getting rough for you. Are you okay? The reassurance that comes with somebody saying, I'm paying attention and I know that you're not okay right now, makes a world of difference. If you are in a relationship with someone with PMDD, understand that this person is not themselves during this phase. That there is a hormonal monster that has just like risen up inside of them and is feeding their brain lies. And their brain eats them because they taste like really delicious donuts and it can't turn them down. And it gorges on them and doesn't know how to say no to them. And you need to understand that this person is experiencing, in a way, delusions. Not in the typical way we think of delusions, like delusions of grandeur, but their entire thinking is clouded to the point that nothing good feels real anymore. It's extremely difficult for them to experience pleasure, and this is why you see almost bipolar-like symptoms with people with PMDD, where they go on these like manic shopping sprees and things like that. They are just like gorging on trying to feel good, or binge drinking, or whatever their particular vice is. You'll see them gorge on it and engage in more and more of it, just trying to feel something good, because literally the hormones that help you to feel pleasure and help you to feel good are at an all-time low, and much lower than it would be on anyone else's normal cycle just having PMS. It's abysmal. It's almost non-existent. And you see this in just the dysphoria that happens with, oh, I think the world is ending. My world is ending anyway. Whether the entire world is ending or not, I don't know, but mine for sure is. I'm going to be broke. I'm going to be alone. I'm going to be homeless. I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose all of my friends. No one loves me. It goes in this cycle of like nothing's good anymore. So this requires a lot of patience, and it requires a lot of reassurance, and you have to know your partner specifically. Some people need words, some people need more action, some people need both. I personally am a words person. I need reassurance. I need you to tell me like a lot, like I love you, and even like go the extra mile, like I still love you even though you're being crazy right now. And I know you don't feel like you're being crazy, or maybe you do, but it's actually not as bad as you think it is right now. And in a week, you're not going to feel this way, and I'm still going to be here. I need it like laid out specifically for me to actually feel reassured. Not everybody is like that. Some people just need you to hug them. Know your partner, and it's okay to ask, like, hey, you, I notice every month for about a week and a half or so, you seem real mad at me a lot. How can I help you? How can I make that better? And don't ask them during that week and a half. Ask them when they're calm. Ask them when they're happy. Ask them when they're not in their luteal phase. Ask them when they're bleeding or right after. Find out what they need, because this is literally life or death. Like, we think about it in crazy terms and bloating terms, but the fact is that women with PMDD are at a 7 times higher risk of suicide attempt as opposed to those who do not have it, and almost 4 times as likely to exhibit suicidal ideation. This isn't small, and I don't know why it's ignored as much as it is, because it's literally killing people. And quite frankly, sometimes I feel like it's killing me. And PMDD is known to get worse as you age, especially in your 30s and 40s. It gets worse. leading up to menopause and into perimenopause is known to progressively get worse during that period. And sometimes I look at the stereotypical things that we think about with women and menstruation and menopause, and I wonder if maybe we just, as a society, just haven't supported our women. And I don't have to wonder that. I know we haven't. But so many of the things that we think about related to them, maybe it wasn't just that they were crazy or angry or hormonal. Maybe it was just that they were traumatized and they were ill because of their trauma, and no one cared enough to help them with it. And I think that's kind of a repeating pattern in our history. And the only way that you can change a pattern is to recognize a pattern. Once you recognize the pattern, you have to make the choice to change the pattern. So what are you going to do in your life? If you have PMDD, or if you know someone who has PMDD, how are you going to change the pattern? Are you going to change the pattern? Does it matter to you? If it doesn't, why doesn't it? And sit with that. Get uncomfortable about it. Because it should matter. It should matter a lot. We should care enough about ourselves and about our fellow humans to want to make a positive change, to want to make a difference, to want to stop negative cycles, to want to change patterns that do not serve, that never did. This episode's a little shorter than most, I think, but I hope that it was beneficial for you in some way. I hope you got something out of it. I hope this was not just me screeching into a microphone, into the void. If you did find it beneficial, you have any comments, you can always feel free to comment in the spaces that allow that, or send me an email at mosaicinprogress@gmail.com. You can also email me if you have episode topic suggestions. Please follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. Share the episodes. Like and follow us on social media. We're on Instagram and Facebook. And as always, please join us next week on the podcast as we both continue to work on our mosaic in progress.